Ever since I was a kid, my dad would always say one thing to me, and every time I heard it, it weighed heavily on my heart. Michael, you were born weak, always daydreaming. Don't ever think you're meant for anything big. My name is Michael Bennett. I'm 25 years old, and I recently became the founder of a promising financial technology startup in Savannah, Georgia. But in my family, success wasn't measured by numbers dancing across a computer screen or million-dollar deals on Wall Street. To my father, success simply meant a sweat-soaked back after a long day's work and calloused hands from hours under the sun. My father, Robert Bennett, ran a small construction company on the outskirts of Savannah for over 30 years. From a single old pickup truck, a few hammers, and a pile of bricks, he'd built a business respected throughout the area. But he never believed that brainpower alone could accomplish anything meaningful without hard labor behind it. When I chose to study finance at the University of Georgia instead of taking over the family business, it was like he lost his successor. The day I received my college acceptance letter, I ran to show it to him, hoping for a nod of encouragement. But he only looked up at me coldly and said something that crushed me. I don't know what kids today are thinking. Instead of a real, honest trade, they want to sit in an air-conditioned room and dream of getting rich. From that moment on, every time I came home, my dad's questions cut deeper. He would constantly compare me to the sons of his friends, electricians, carpenters, truck drivers, and he would always end the conversation with the same heartbreaking line. "You'll come crawling back to this work. That brain of yours isn't cut out for business, Michael." I never argued. I simply endured it in silence, quietly building a fire inside, promising myself that one day I would prove my worth. Throughout college, I lived like a ghost. While others partied or dated, I buried myself in the library, studying code, analyzing financial charts. I believed if I worked long enough, hard enough, the results would eventually come. But every visit home, my efforts were dismissed by the same disappointed gaze. After graduation, instead of taking a stable job at a large company, I chose to take a risk and start my own business. Ryan, my best friend from college, and I rented a tiny old apartment in downtown Savannah and turned it into our first office. No sign on the door, no receptionist, just 2 old laptops and a lot of hope. I wanted to build a platform that would make investing and managing money easy for regular people, not just Wall Street pros. At first, it was brutally tough. Ryan and I often sat in silence for hours after being rejected again and again by investors. Sometimes, we barely had enough money for a proper meal. But whenever exhaustion hit, I remembered my father's words. And that disdain fueled me to keep pushing late into the night. A month ago, after dozens of meetings and countless pitches, I finally received an email from Silver Lake Capital, a major investment fund based in New York. They wanted to invest $12 million, 0 cents, in my company. I froze in the middle of our tiny kitchen, feeling like my heart had stopped for a second. I read that email nearly a dozen times before nervously calling Ryan. He screamed so loud over the phone that I had to pull it away from my ear. And yet, despite the overwhelming joy, one unanswered question lingered inside me. What would my father think when he heard this news? I decided this time I would prove my success in a way that couldn't be dismissed. I wanted him to see that what I achieved wasn't luck or fantasy. It was built through grit and relentless perseverance. Not calloused hands, but something just as real. I didn't tell my father about the investment from Silver Lake Capital right away. Instead, I kept my head down and worked even harder. Ryan and I moved to a slightly bigger office, nothing fancy, but this time, we put up a real sign. Bright Vest Financial, a name we thought up during a sleepless night, dreaming of bringing clarity to those lost in a sea of financial information. From then on, 14-hour workdays became routine. Ryan often joked that if there were an endurance competition, I'd win gold. But I knew this wasn't a game. It was a battle, against doubts from the world and from the people I loved most. Still, conversations with my father didn't change. Every time I called home, he kept the same cold tone, tossing in jabs like, Still playing around with those computers, Michael? When are you going to get a real job? I just smiled, swallowed my feelings, and kept working, harder. Late at night, with only the fan buzzing in our empty office, I sometimes asked myself, was I doing this out of passion, or just to prove him wrong? Last summer, I made the hard decision to abandon my plan for graduate school. When I broke the news over the phone, silence stretched painfully across the line. Then my father muttered, "That boy's hopeless." I heard my mother sigh quietly before the call ended without any word of encouragement. The following months were the toughest of my life. Silver Lake Capital had invested, but they also had sky-high expectations. We had just 6 months to deliver a working product or the deal would collapse. Ryan and I worked day and night, sometimes arguing so fiercely we almost threw chairs. But every morning, we were back at our desks, pushing through another line of code, another design tweak. Outside, Georgia's summer heat scorched everything it touched. Inside, the pressure was even heavier. There were days I forgot to eat or sleep, surviving on coffee alone, eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. Ryan had to physically hide my laptop just to force me to rest. "If you collapse now," he growled, his eyes just as hollow as mine, "everything we've built will fall apart." Meanwhile, life for my peers kept moving forward. Friends my age were getting married, buying houses, celebrating fancy vacations on social media. Me? I had half-finished contracts, incomplete code, and a mountain of stress. And every short call home was laced with my father's thinly veiled scorn. "Michael, have you even made a single dollar yet, or are you still living off charity?" Each time the words punched me straight in the gut. But I didn't argue. I clenched my fists, took a deep breath, and went back to work. Then one night, just past midnight, we finally finished the final line of code. Ryan collapsed into a chair, exhaling heavily. For the first time in months, I looked up at the ceiling, eyes burning, but my heart felt strangely light. We had done it. We had built a complete platform, a tool that could help everyday people analyze finances quickly, easily, and most importantly, independently of Wall Street's grip. The next morning, I sent our first demo to Silver Lake Capital. 48 hours later, the response came back. "Excellent work. Proceed to phase 2. I reached for my phone, about to call my mom to share the news. But my hand froze mid-air. I knew if I called, she would cry. Tears of pride. And my father? He'd probably just scoff and say, "Let's see how long it lasts." It didn't matter anymore. I was patient now. I no longer needed his approval. I'm walking my own path, and that path, though full of stones and setbacks, is leading me somewhere I never dared to dream of. About 3 weeks after sending out our demo, I received an email from a name I had never even dared to hope for. Redmont Capital Partners, one of the most prestigious venture capital firms in Chicago. The message was short, but made my heart race. "Michael, we're very impressed with the technology your team has developed. We'd like to discuss a partnership opportunity." I almost dropped my phone. Ryan jumped up and down like a kid who just won the lottery. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just an investment opportunity. This was Brightvest's ticket into the spotlight, or a crash landing right before reaching it. Our first meeting with Redmont took place in a massive glass tower in downtown Chicago. Ryan and I wore suits we had rushed to buy from a discount store, stepping into a huge room, where 3 senior partners were already waiting. Despite their polite appearance, their questions were sharp as scalpels. "How do you plan to scale the platform nationwide? How will you prevent major competitors from copying your technology? Do you have an exit plan if the market doesn't respond as expected?" Each question felt like a test, but I didn't flinch. I answered clearly and confidently, fueled by everything I had learned and endured over the past 3 years. When the meeting ended, one of the partners, Angela Moore, a powerhouse at Redmont, stood up and gave a rare smile. "Michael, you have something money can't buy: vision and resilience." 3 days later, we received a formal investment offer, $15 million, 0 cents, for 25% equity. When I held the contract in my hands, I had to sit down because my legs suddenly felt weak. I had dreamed of this moment thousands of times. But now that it had actually arrived, the feeling wasn't explosive joy. It was a quiet peace, like finally reaching the shore after surviving countless storms. News of the deal spread quickly. Financial news outlets began publishing stories about Brightvest. One headline on TechCrunch read, "25-year-old from Savannah set to revolutionize how Americans manage their money." The Southeast edition of the Wall Street Journal even featured a photo of me and Ryan, standing proudly in front of our tiny but hopeful office. The most surprising part was that even local TV stations started reaching out for interviews. I still remember the day a WXIA TV anchor asked me on camera, "Michael, how does it feel knowing that just a few years ago you were living off instant noodles, and now you're closing million-dollar deals?" I smiled calmly and answered, "Actually, those noodles taught me a big lesson. Everything tastes better when you cook it yourself. Same with success. You want it, you have to build it yourself." That offhand reply got clipped into memes that quickly went viral across social media. Friends messaged me congratulations nonstop. Even investors who had once rejected me started reaching back out, hinting they'd like to reconsider partnering. But amid all the noise, I found myself waiting for just one thing. A message, a call, or even a simple word of congratulations from my father. It never came. Instead, one late evening, I got a call from Uncle Mark, my father's younger brother. He spoke, his voice awkward. "Michael, your dad saw the news. But," he said, "let the kids celebrate. Reality will hit soon enough." I sank into my chair, feeling like someone had poured ice water straight into my chest. I had once believed that success would heal all wounds and erase all doubts. But the truth was, some scars run deeper than fame or bank account numbers could ever reach. That night, as Savannah glittered softly under the streetlights, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching the river flow silently beneath the moonlight. I realized I no longer needed my father's approval to feel victorious. I needed victory for myself. That was the night I promised myself. Brightvest wasn't just going to be a million-dollar company. It would be part of a real change, something no one, not even my father, could deny. And I knew the real journey had only just begun. I knew that I would never earn his respect just by sending an email or a headline. He needed to see it with his own eyes. He had to witness how far I had truly come. So I made a decision. If he wouldn't come to see my success, I would bring it to him. In a way he couldn't ignore. 1 week after the Wall Street Journal article, I walked into a Mercedes-Benz showroom in downtown Savannah. I didn't buy a Ferrari, too flashy for my style. Instead, I chose a deep blue Mercedes-AMG GT, strong, elegant, and unmistakably powerful, just the way I wanted to show up. When I signed the papers, the salesman kept glancing skeptically at my hoodie and jeans. But after I wired the payment instantly, his demeanor changed so fast it was almost funny. Driving the AMG off the lot that cool May afternoon, the sunlight draping over oak-lined streets, I gripped the steering wheel tightly. My heart pounded, not for the car, but for what it represented. Every sleepless night, every rejection, every silent doubt I had conquered. I didn't call ahead. I knew that today was Grandpa's 60th birthday party, the perfect gathering where the entire Bennett family would be there, to witness it all. I drove the AMG down the dusty road leading to the family farm. The engine's deep rumble silenced all the chatter. Every head turned as my sleek car rolled up right next to my father's battered old pickup. I stepped out, wearing a crisp white dress shirt and light gray khakis, a calm smile on my face. Whispers rippled across the yard. I caught my mother's eye first, her hand flying to her mouth, tears shining. My father, standing at the grill, holding a spatula, stayed stone-faced. I walked straight toward him. "Hi, Dad," I said, voice steady and low. He squinted, glanced at the car behind me, then jerked his chin up. "Whose car did you borrow, Michael?" Laughter erupted from the cousins nearby. I smiled, pulled out the car keys and ownership papers from my pocket, and handed them over. "See for yourself." He skimmed the documents, folded them neatly, and tucked them into his pocket, like they meant nothing. "Nice," he said dryly. "Spending money's easy. Let's see if you can hold on to it." Those words, once sharp enough to wound me, now barely stirred a ripple. I had learned. His words no longer defined me. Throughout the party, the adults whispered to each other while the kids rushed over to admire the shiny car. A few family members, like Uncle Mark and Aunt Susan, came over to shake my hand and congratulate me sincerely. But my father kept his distance, occasionally throwing cold glances my way. When the party wound down, I found him standing alone by the orange grove behind the house, a beer can in hand, staring off into the distance. "Dad," I called out as I walked toward him. He didn't turn around, just smirked and said, "What, here to tell me more about the articles praising you?" I shook my head. "No, I don't need your praise. I just want you to know, I got here on my own. No one handed me anything." He stayed silent for a long moment before replying coolly, "We'll see. Easy money comes, easy goes, easy, Michael." I nodded, not arguing. "Then let time answer," I said. "I don't need to prove anything anymore." I turned away, leaving him standing there in the orchard as the sunset deepened. A small part of me still hoped he would call after me, even if just to say one simple word of acknowledgement. But he didn't. Only the dry rustle of old leaves filled the evening air. I made my way to the car, feeling lighter somehow. Sometimes, growing up isn't about earning someone's approval. It's about accepting that some people may never recognize your worth. And with that, I started the AMG and drove off into the fading light. On the straight road leading back to the city, a new chapter of my life was opening, silent but full of pride. I thought that after the party, things between my father and me would ease up. Even if he didn't admit it, at least he had seen with his own eyes how far I had come. But I was too naive. Just a week later, Ryan walked into the office, his face heavy like he'd swallowed rocks. "Michael," he said, placing his phone down on the table. "You need to see this." He showed me a string of text messages from one of our potential partners, Green Rock Investments, a firm we were negotiating with. The message was short but chilling. "Apologies, after verifying some information from local sources, we've decided to pause the partnership. We need to ensure full financial transparency before moving forward." I stared at Ryan in confusion. "Local sources, who?" Ryan hesitated, then sighed. "Uncle Mark just texted me. Robert, your dad, he's been talking to some people in the local business circle. And he's openly saying that Brightvest is just a media stunt, and that Michael's nothing but a smooth talker selling dreams." I sat there, frozen. So not only did my father not believe in me, he was actively trying to destroy the reputation I had worked so hard to build. The rumors spread like wildfire. Within 2 days, 2 more potential partners canceled their meetings. I even got a call from Angela Moore at Redmont Capital, polite but clearly concerned. "Michael, there are some rumors circulating about Brightvest exaggerating achievements and facing financial troubles. We'll need more detailed reports before releasing the next round of funding." I nodded, thanked her for her honesty, then hung up, my hands gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I knew exactly where this was coming from, and I knew I had to face it before everything unraveled. The next day, I drove to my parents' house. During the long drive, I kept telling myself to stay calm, to act like a man, not a wounded son. My father was sitting on the porch, one foot resting on the railing, a cold beer in his hand. He saw me pull up, his face betraying no surprise, like he had expected me. I walked straight up, no small talk. "Dad," I said, voice steady. "Why did you do it?" He shrugged indifferently. "I just told the truth. I said a business built in the clouds without roots is bound to collapse eventually. But you don't know the truth," I replied, struggling to keep my voice calm. "You never asked. You never cared to find out what I've built." He let out a cold laugh. "Enough, Michael. That computer game of yours isn't going to save you. When the bubble bursts, you'll need a real job. Might even have to beg me for a spot on my construction crew." I looked at him, heart tightening, not from the insult, but from the deep bitterness in his eyes. as if my success was a betrayal of everything he had ever believed in. "You're not protecting the family by tearing down what I'm building," I said quietly. "You're just showing that you're more afraid of change than anything else." He shot to his feet, eyes blazing. "I don't need a lecture from a kid who still smells like school." We stood there, facing each other under the sweltering Savannah sun. 2 generations, 2 worlds, neither willing to back down. Finally, I took a deep breath and turned away. "You've made your choice," I said. "And so have I." I walked straight to my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Inside, sadness surged, but underneath it was a certainty I had never felt before. I wasn't going to let the past drag me back. I had come too far to turn around now. The next morning, I gathered Ryan and the entire Brightvest team. We drew up a detailed plan to fight back. We would host a public conference, release our audited financials, invite major investors to see our operations firsthand. If the truth alone wasn't enough to crush the rumors, our actions would be. The conference was set for 3 weeks later. 3 weeks to turn the tables. I looked around the room, at every single person listening intently. These people didn't believe in me because of some flashy headlines or a fancy car. They believed because they had watched me fight for this every single day. I nodded, my gaze steely. "Let's get started," I said. "We're going to show the world the truth doesn't have to shout, it just needs to stand firm." And this time, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everyone who had put their faith in me, despite the whispers. That night, after leaving the office, I drove straight to my mother's house. I needed to hear from her, a part of the truth I suspected I still didn't fully know. The small house outside town was bathed in soft, golden light. My mother was sitting at the dining table, absent-mindedly turning a cold cup of tea in her hands. When she saw me step in, she smiled sadly, as if she had been expecting this visit. "Have you eaten yet?" she asked, her voice warm and familiar. I shook my head, pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Without wasting time, I looked her straight in the eye. "Mom, I need to know. What is Dad really thinking? Why is he doing this to me?" She stayed silent for a long time, like she was torn between loyalty to her husband and compassion for her son. Finally, she sighed, her voice thin as a thread. "Michael, your father doesn't hate you. He's scared." I frowned. Scared? The man who built houses with his bare hands, who faced Georgia's fiercest storms without flinching. Scared of me? Mom gazed out the window, where the early summer breeze tilted the white magnolia branches. "About 2 years ago, your father's construction company started to slip. Big corporations flooded into Savannah, armed with money, technology, and professional marketing teams. They underbid contracts by margins we couldn't even imagine." She paused, her voice dropping lower. "He tried. He took out more loans, bought new equipment, hired more workers. But the harder he tried, the deeper he sank. Costs soared, contracts dwindled." A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just pride or stubbornness. It was the panic of a man watching the world collapse beneath him, powerless to stop it. "He didn't tell anyone," Mom continued. "Not me, not you. He was afraid that admitting failure would mean admitting that everything he had believed his whole life, that hard work, honesty, perseverance, was meaningless." I clenched my hands under the table. The stubbornness, the harsh words, the hurtful comments, it was all just a shield. A desperate way to protect the last bit of belief he had left. "Mom," I asked, my voice hoarse. "Then why would he go out of his way to tear me down? Why not just stay silent?" She gave a sad smile. "Because admitting you're right, admitting you could succeed down a different path, would mean admitting he was wrong. Wrong about how he sees the world. Wrong about everything he sacrificed his life to teach you." She reached out and squeezed my hand. Small, but full of strength. "Your father doesn't hate you, Michael. He just doesn't know how to accept that the world has changed, and he didn't change with it." I sat there for a long time, the steady ticking of the kitchen clock filling the silence. Part of me felt lighter, at least now I understood. But part of me ached even more. My father wasn't the enemy. He was a man trapped in a world that had moved on without him, and somehow, I had become the symbol of that betrayal. Driving back into the city, those thoughts tangled in my mind, like a mess of wires. Ahead, Savannah's city lights blinked like distant stars. I knew I couldn't drag my father back to the past, but maybe, if I was patient enough, strong enough, I could show him that the old values didn't have to disappear. They just needed a new way to live. The next morning, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and started drafting a plan. A plan not just to save Brightvest's reputation, but to pull my father out of the quiet desperation that was swallowing him whole. I wasn't going to fight against him anymore. I was going to fight for him. And this time, I would do it in the language he understood best. Action. No debates, no pleas. Just proof. Because sometimes, the strongest form of love is loving someone even when they can't meet you halfway. Monday morning, I sat in the Brightvest office, a strong black coffee in front of me, and the plan I had sketched out over a sleepless night. Helping Dad couldn't just mean handing him money. I knew that would crush his pride before it ever helped him. I needed a solution he could accept with dignity, something that let him stand tall, not feel like he was leaning on me. First, I dug deep into the situation at his company, Bennett Construction and Masonry. A few discreet calls to old family friends, combined with information from the city's Chamber of Commerce, confirmed what Mom had said. The company had posted losses for 2 consecutive years, major contracts had all but dried up, and the bank was breathing down his neck. I needed a strong partner who could take over the operation, and convince Dad it was a step forward, not a defeat. After days of searching, I settled on a choice. Crestfield Builders, the largest construction firm in the Southeast, was looking to expand into Savannah's residential market. I arranged a quick lunch meeting with their CEO, Harold Simmons, at the Hyatt by the river. Harold was a solidly built man with eyes as sharp as tempered steel. I laid it out straight. Buy my father's company at above market value, retain all current staff, and offer Dad a regional manager role for at least 5 years, with a say in expansion strategy. Harold leaned back in his chair, narrowing his eyes. Are you sure the old man will go for it? Folks from the old school tend to be stubborn. I smiled and replied, I don't need him to agree right away. I just need to give him a chance to feel proud, not defeated. 2 days later, I had a draft deal. Crestfield would pay $1,500,000, 0 cents to acquire Bennett Construction and Masonry, double what industry appraisers had valued it at. Most importantly, Dad would stay on as a regional manager without the financial pressure, and all his employees would transition over with full senior staff benefits. At the same time, I launched Phase 2 of my plan, expanding Brightvest. I leased an old warehouse on the outskirts of Savannah, about a 15-minute drive from downtown, once an agricultural equipment factory. The plan was to transform it into an innovation hub, Brightvest's new headquarters and a startup incubator for young tech entrepreneurs in the area. I needed someone to run it, someone who understood me, shared my vision, and could turn ideas into action. And I knew just the person, Tyler, my cousin, who had just graduated with a business degree from the University of Georgia. I called Tyler to our usual coffee shop, placed an employment contract in front of him, and said, Tyler, I want you to run the center. You'll manage projects, connect with startups, oversee training programs. Basically, turn it into the birthplace of Savannah's next generation of entrepreneurs. Tyler's eyes widened. I've never run anything this big, Michael, are you sure? I laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. When I started Brightvest, I didn't even know the difference between cash flow and profit margin. But one thing I did know, if you don't give up, you can learn anything. My young cousin nodded, the same spark of determination lighting up his eyes that I once saw in myself. 3 weeks later, everything was in motion. The acquisition deal for my father's company was nearly complete. The tech center renovations were underway. Tyler had started recruiting operational staff. Ryan was leading the tech team and upgrading Brightvest to version 2. Only one step remained, convincing my father to sign the agreement, without making him feel forced or pitied. I chose a Friday afternoon to visit. Dad was sitting in his old office, surrounded by piles of paperwork and the faint, stale smell of dried sweat. I placed the folder on his desk without saying a word. He glanced at the cover, frowning. "What's this?" I sat across from him, speaking calmly. "This is a chance for you to preserve the legacy you spent 30 years building. No shutting down, no fire sale. Just partnering with a strong enough ally to move the company forward." He flipped through the documents, silent for a long time. I saw his calloused hands tremble slightly, a fragile moment between pride and reality. Finally, he set the papers down and looked up at me, his eyes filled with things too heavy for words. "And you think you're gonna save me with some paperwork, Michael?" he said. I shook my head firmly. "No, Dad. I'm not saving you. I'm just reaching out. You can take it or not. It's your choice." Our eyes locked, a silent but fierce battle. I didn't know what he would choose. But I knew that this time I had done my part. With respect, not pity. 3 days after that tense meeting, I got a call from Mom. "Michael," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "your father, he signed." I sat frozen in my office, coffee cooling in my hand. A flood of emotions rose inside me: relief, worry, and somewhere a deep, bittersweet ache. Not because Dad had finally accepted my solution, but because I understood signing that contract wasn't just a business decision for him. It was letting go of a part of his life he had poured his soul into. That afternoon, I met him again at the office that, in just a few weeks, would belong to Crestfield Builders. Dad sat behind his familiar desk, heavy but calm. He handed me the signed contract, then stood up, shrugging on his worn leather jacket. "Let's go," he said, like all of this was nothing more than a simple transaction between two men. We drove together to the new tech center, the once abandoned warehouse now gleaming with the Bright Vest Innovation Hub sign. Groups of engineers, coders, and young entrepreneurs buzzed in and out, filling the air with energy. Tyler met us at the door, quickly updating us. 3 startups had officially signed leases. The first training program for small local businesses would launch next month. Free financial literacy workshops were drawing strong community interest. I glanced at Dad. He stood with his hands on his hips, eyes narrowing under the evening sun. No contempt, no fear, just caution, and maybe, just maybe, a glimmer of hope. The next step had already been prepared. Incorporating Dad's hands-on experience into the new model, I presented the idea to our executive team. We would expand the center to include a new division, the Academy for Traditional Skills and Trades, led by my father. The idea was to retrain veteran craftsmen, those who once excelled but now struggled in the digital age. They would learn to use technology to find clients, manage projects, and market services, while preserving the integrity of true craftsmanship in the modern world. At first, Dad listened in silence, his expression unreadable. But when I explained that this program would not only save tradesmen but also honor the spirit of the work he cherished, I saw his eyes light up. "Old man," I said, half joking, "you won't be stuck behind a desk anymore. You'll lead a program helping hundreds like you reclaim their place." Dad nodded, slowly but firmly. "All right," he said, "but I'm writing the curriculum myself. No fluffy theory from you." I laughed and held out my hand. "Deal." He gripped my hand, the firm shake of a skilled craftsman, not the stubborn old man he once seemed. 3 months later, the first training program launched. Over 50 attendees, from seasoned carpenters to young electricians just starting out. My father stood on the small stage, holding a microphone, his thick southern drawl steady and compelling. "We're not changing to chase anyone," he said. "We're changing to hold on to the pride in what we do." The hall erupted in applause. Bright Vest wasn't just Savannah's tech hub anymore. It had become a bridge between the old workforce and the new generation, the strength of hands and the strength of minds. The craftsmen who once feared technology now used project management software, designed orders through apps, and marketed themselves online. Revenue for traditional service groups soared. Many opened their own businesses for the first time, hiring employees instead of relying only on word-of-mouth gigs. Mom, watching everything unfold, teared up during every phone call. "Your father's different now, Michael," she said. "He doesn't talk about failure anymore. He talks about what he's going to build next. And me, Every time I walked into that center, seeing Dad, laughing with young tradesmen, sharing skills, teaching them how to lay a perfect brick or read a blueprint, I knew I hadn't just saved a company, I had saved an entire generation of values, once buried under Savannah's old rooftops. And somehow, in that journey, I found the father I thought I had lost long ago beneath layers of dust and pride. As time passed, everything changed in ways even I hadn't expected. Dad and I still couldn't talk for hours like those movie father-son scenes. No tearful hugs, no grand apologies. But strangely, in the brief moments between meetings, I started to feel something even deeper. We talked about work, about the old construction techniques he knew by heart, about how young tradesmen were applying technology in real-world projects, about how to preserve the soul of craftsmanship in a world that was evolving faster every day. One afternoon, after finishing a training session for the electricians, Dad pulled me aside behind the center, where trucks loaded with materials were lined up. He reached into his jacket pocket and silently handed me a check. I unfolded it and froze. $250,000. Written clearly in the memo line, investment in Brightvest. I looked up, my mouth dry, at a loss for words. Dad crossed his arms, locking eyes with me. "Don't think I've changed my mind about your tech stuff," he said bluntly. "I just know, if anyone can turn that into something real, it's you." I let out a soft laugh, folded the check carefully, and slipped it into my pocket. "I won't let you down," I said. He shrugged, a silent, "we'll see," but the corner of his mouth lifted. A rare smile I had only ever seen in the old family photos Mom kept. From that day forward, Dad wasn't just leading the traditional skills program. He became an advisor to Brightvest, especially on projects blending technology with manual labor services. We launched a new initiative called Heritage Works, a program helping traditional businesses adopt modern management software, digital marketing, and automation without losing their core values. Dad personally joined me at local trade fairs, pitching the program to small business owners, people just like him 30 years ago, struggling to bridge the gap between tradition and the digital world. Our conversations now weren't battles. They were fiery debates, meaningful ones, about what true quality meant, about how to innovate without losing your roots. Mom told me that every time Dad came home after working with me, he would sit quietly at the kitchen table, holding a coffee cup, lost in thought, but smiling to himself. "He's proud of you," she whispered one evening when I came by for dinner. "Even if he still grumbles, deep down, he's been proud for a long time." I didn't answer, just looked toward the living room where Dad sat, studying an improved design for a new model home our center was about to build. Part of me finally understood. We might never have the perfect father-son relationship, but that didn't matter anymore, because we had built something stronger. Silent recognition, slow trust, and a kind of love that didn't need grand words. A love shown through action, through walking side by side on impossible projects. 3 months later, during the grand opening of Brightvest Heritage Village, a showcase of modern homes built with traditional craftsmanship and green technology, I invited Dad on stage with me. He stood there, wearing the old shirt Mom always complained about, but he stubbornly refused to part with, his eyes shining under the stage lights. I turned to the crowd, my voice steady. "This man, Robert Bennett, isn't just the best builder I've ever known. He's the one who taught me that if you want a building to last, you have to start with a strong foundation. And today, I want to say, everything Brightvest has accomplished, it all started from that foundation." The hall erupted in applause. Dad tilted his head toward me, saying nothing, but in his eyes I saw what I had yearned for all those years: acknowledgement. No more words were needed. We had built a bridge over old wounds, old differences. A bridge made of bricks, technology, and silent love. About half a year after the Heritage Village grand opening, I sat alone in my office, looking out the window at the Savannah River, glittering in the afternoon sun. The journey I once thought was about proving myself right had led me somewhere completely different. Not to the top of some mountain of glory, but into the heart of something much bigger: reconciliation. When I was younger, I thought success meant making those who doubted me bow their heads in admission. I thought a luxury car, $1 million deal, or a headline would be the ultimate revenge. But now, looking back, I understood. Real success isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about building something meaningful, not just a company, but a bridge between old and new values, between generations who once couldn't even understand each other. My father no longer saw Brightvest as some computer game.
He saw it as a tool to preserve and grow what his generation had poured sweat into. And I no longer viewed his old methods as obstacles. I had learned to respect honest labor, to value how each brick laid carried pride with it. Our relationship, while never perfectly smooth, had found a new rhythm. Collaboration instead of conflict, listening instead of judging. Every week, we shared a standing lunch at a small diner on River Street. There, instead of arguing about right and wrong, we discussed plans, expanding the skills training center, launching affordable housing projects for working families, finding ways to connect college students with small local businesses. At those lunches, sometimes when Dad told stories about his early days, patching roads with just an old shovel and a naive fire in his heart, his eyes lit up like a boy's. And I realized beneath his gruff exterior was a soul still longing to believe that honest effort would never go out of style. Mom, watching us, just smiled quietly. She didn't need to say anything. I knew she was happy to see the two men she loved most finally learning to walk side by side, not against each other. Brightvest's success was no longer measured by revenue or employee numbers. It was measured by stories. An old carpenter learning 3D design software to land more contracts. A young electrician once desperate for work, now marketing his services online. Families who owned their first homes, built by combining traditional craftsmanship and modern technology. And woven through all those stories was one simple truth. Real value never goes out of style. It just needs a new form to survive. That evening, before leaving the office, I passed the main conference room, where a big sign now hung that Dad and I had chosen together. Building the future, grounded in the foundations of the past. I stood there for a long moment, staring at those words, feeling a strange, deep peace. Outside, rain was beginning to fall. I threw my jacket over my shoulders and stepped out into the street, my heart as light as the first time I had ever left Savannah to chase a dream. Only this time, I wasn't walking alone. My father, my mother, the young tradesmen, the small business owners, all of us were walking that road together, a road no longer divided between old and new, past and future. And I knew that wherever that road led, the things built with love, respect, and quiet trust would last. Just like a good house. It doesn't need to be flashy, just strong enough to shelter the dreams growing inside it. This story shows us that true success isn't about defeating or proving someone wrong. It's about building something meaningful through understanding and mutual respect. Generational conflicts often stem from fear of change and pressure to preserve old values. But when we combine traditional wisdom with new technology, when we listen instead of argue, we can create a shared future where everyone can be proud of their contribution. What do you think about Michael's journey and the transformation of his relationship with his father? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring family stories.